Now, I'm going to give you a brief history of my life here in Pickmere. I was born in Pickmere. Both Roy and I are war babies. Roy was born in Lymm during the war, and I was born here in Pickmere just after the war. My family are the Hickson family. The Lord de Tabley from Tabley House is my third great-grandfather. My parents lived on adjoining farms, Deansland, which is now Providence, and Tanyard Farms. They married and lived at Deansland, but farmed both farms. After their wedding service at Great Budworth Church, my parents enjoyed their wedding breakfast at Cheatham's Restaurant here in Pickmere. I have the invoice from the occasion, which makes very interesting reading. The invoice is from the Pickmere Boating Company, signed by a Mr. Turton. Some of us knew Mr. Turton. They had 43 guests, and it cost £16, 19 shillings. Their 3 wedding cars cost £17, 10 shillings. And interestingly enough, my mother's bouquet from Cordwell's nursery in Knutsford cost £7. So that was nearly half the cost of the wedding breakfast for the flowers. So in 1945, flowers were jolly expensive, weren't they? Goodness me. Now, Deansland Farm, down Millie Lane, that's where you can go down the public footpath and walk through to the A556 and come near to the Smoker pub. Now, the Merlin telescope is in the orchard. But the farmhouse itself was originally 2 cottages called Providence Cottages. A family called Wright used to live there, but they changed the name from Providence to Deansland. But James Wright was a farmer, but he was also a preacher at Pickmere Chapel for 50 years. They later moved to the house opposite the Methodist Chapel, behind the council houses, and then they called their new property Deansland Poultry Farm. Consequently, we had 2 Deansland farms in Pickmere. That caused a little bit of a problem for the post office. So they had problems in those days. So they changed the name back to Providence. I had a happy childhood here in Pickmere. My parents were very Victorian in discipline, but they were very kind. We were still on rationing. I remember coupons for petrol, sugar, bacon, and many other things. So food was basic, and we made all our own clothes. We had to make, do, and mend in those days. And we did everything by hand, because we didn't have any electricity at the farm until I was 17. So in 1963, my dad was charged £3,000 to run the overhead electricity power line from Rose's farm to Deansland Farm, which is approximate to half a mile. And that was a heck of a lot of money in those days, £3,000, gracious me. Now, our toilet was down the stackyard next to the pigsty. It wasn't very nice in the winter. We had no running water, so we used a pump. And in the winter, it used to freeze. So we had to make sure that we had the water in the house ready for breakfast the next morning. We bathed, Roy finds this rather funny, we bathed in a tin bath in front of the fire, but don't tell anybody.
We've still got it.
No, we haven't. And our light was provided by paraffin lamps and candles. We cooked on a big black leaded range, heated by coal, and it was my job to clean it once a week, and that was a really messy task. Monday was always washing day. Come whatever, come rain, come shine, we did the washing on a Monday. We washed the clothes in a dolly tub, bashed with a posser, and then scrubbed on a scrubbing board. Then we put through a hand mangle, and it took all day, after which we were absolutely exhausted. Ironing was done in the evening. Everything had to be ironed and starched, including the cotton sheets. We used flat irons of different sizes, heated in front of the fire, and many times I burnt my fingers on those flat irons. The kitchen floor was red quarry tiles, which had to be kept clean with cardinal wax. Again, that was another messy job. Even the front door steps, the slabs at the front, had to be cleaned with donkey stone once a week. Because we didn't have electricity, I used to play the piano in the parlour, and that was by candlelight. And the candles on the piano used to drip, and then I was in serious trouble. In the winter, there was no heating whatsoever upstairs, so the house was cold, and the inside of the windows froze over. I wore a thick Liberty bodice with rubber buttons all down the front, and if you caught those rubber buttons with an iron, they used to melt, and then they become rather sticky. We had stone hot water bottles filled with hot water. The bed was big and fluffy and made of feathers, and we had a feather mattress and feather pillows, and the bed head was brass. Can you imagine children? I'm now going to give you a brief history of Pickmere during the war years. Now, during World War II, Pickmere served as a refuge for many evacuees from Manchester, Salford and Liverpool. The village accommodated them in caravans and timber chalets, and we had up to 300 chalets down here on the lakeside. The children attended Winsham School, and we made some very good friends. The Cheetham family ran the Pickmere Boating Company and restaurant for more than 60 years, and they retired in 1990. Many of the lakeside attractions are still fondly remembered by generations of visitors. Some still come to Pickmere expecting there to be a fun lake down by the lake. The only advantage in those days was the fact that we had many large car parks, and those are now long gone. Even in those days, on a hot bank holiday, visitors queued in their cars, motorbikes and charabancs as far as the Windmill pub at Tabley along Pickmere Lane. Down at the lake, there were rowing boats, little motorboats, and bigger boat, the Princess Irene, which could accommodate up to 40 passengers, and it did pleasure cruises around the lake. Sadly, the Irene is now scuttled in the middle of the lake. On the lakeside, there was a fun fair with dodgem cars, a carousel, a ghost train, and even a helter-skelter at one time. There was a tuck shop selling Pickmere Rock. Can you imagine that? Pickmere Rock. And fantastic ice cream from Harry Hassel's ice cream cart. How many of you here can remember Harry Hassel's ice cream? Not many of you, some of you can, okay. And those cones in those days cost twopence each, that's 2D, the old money. During the war years, Pickmere was invaded by American servicemen. They were stationed at Winsham Hall, and they made their Pickmere Jubilee Club their favourite watering hole. British airmen also came to Pickmere, but in their Spitfires, using the lake for diving practice, diving and skimming the water to within a few feet. My granddad lived at the farm before my parents, and they employed German prisoners of war from the Marbury Prisoner of War camp. I have a letter here, written in broken English. It was from one of the prisoners, written to my granddad, and he addresses my granddad as Dear Sir Holt. And you're welcome to come and have a look at that letter afterwards if you'd like to do it. I also have some shrapnel from a bomb which just missed the farmhouse. It landed in the adjoining field, leaving a huge crater. Apparently, according to my mum, they could hear the bomber overhead. When the whole family dived under the large kitchen table, colliding in the middle. Land Army girls were also employed on the farm. They were based at Tabley in a hostel that was situated just opposite where the kennels and the cattery are now. I remember having a gas mask in a case with a carrying handle. It was always kept under the bed at night in case of emergency. In the 1920s, there was an annual Pickmere Carnival, later carried on by Winsham School, and they changed the name from Carnival to Fete. I used to love our Fete days, and we had our own queen here in the village, Gina Gates. In those days, we had a village sweet shop up past Cobb Lodge, run by Mrs. Bradbury. We had our own post office and shop, run by Gina Gates with her mother, a Mrs. Colburn, and her granny, Mrs. Hankey, before that. Mr. Hankey was a joiner, working from down Spinks Lane. Gardener Joe Davis ran a market garden on the end of Spinks Lane, supplying the village with beautiful veg and fruit. His wife was the local midwife, and she delivered most of the babies in Pickmere. I know she delivered my sister, can remember it. One of the most well-known villagers here was Joe Robinson. He was a local historian who wrote many books on the village and surrounding areas, and they were all beautifully illustrated with old photographs. Most of you will know Anne Robinson, his widow, and also Jane Henderson, his daughter. Joe is still very sadly missed. He was a wonderfully interesting man, and we used to call him Mr. Pickmere, and I think that was a well-deserved title. We had a Volvo dealership in the garage along Park Lane, where the houses are now, and another village shop. There was also the Lake House Cafe on Mere Lane, and you can still see the remains of the sign on the bricks at the side of the house if you have a look. It's faint now, but it's still there. The village also had a number of pubs, including the Red Lion, the Elms, the Endeavour Club, the Jubilee Club, and the Happy Hour Club, down on the Orchards, where the Orchards now stands, and all the pubs had a car park. Gosh, we had a lot of pubs, didn't we? The biggest venue was Cheatham's Restaurant, of course. They used to cater for day trippers in charabancs. Also hosted many concerts and dances, and I have happy memories of singing solos there. Cheatham's building was where Jacob's Way now stands. Just up the road we have the Windmill Pub and All the Smoker on the A556. Both pubs were named by Lord de Tabley, my third great-grandfather. They were named after his horses, and the signs were originally painted by a member of the Leicester family. Now, I would like you to encourage you all to think about all the men and women from Pickmere and surrounding villages who went to fight for us, for our freedom today. Because of their sacrifice, we are able to live in our beautiful village in peace and harmony. Peace that is won at the cost of the battle. Love that is plucked from fires of hate. Joy that is born of the heart's despairing. Triumphs achieved in the teeth of fate. Knowledge that great men have died to give us freedom, brought early through sacrifice. Truth that is proved in the blood of martyrs. These are the treasures beyond all price. God bless them all. Thank you.